All right, so it is time for our fourth philosopher, right? Hobbes is still all by himself in classical conservative land. Locke and Montesquieu now have a bromance, right? And they're about to get another friend, that being Jean-Jacques Rousseau. So let's talk about, guys, what makes Rousseau a classical liberal philosopher. As far as, again, guys, remember, when we're talking classical liberal, we're talking about this idea of limited power and ensuring that government follows this idea of the will of the people, right? So let's talk about our friend Jean-Jacques Rousseau. So a little bit of history about him, right? He was originally born in Switzerland. I know the name Rousseau sounds like he perhaps was French, but I mean, if you know anything about Switzerland, it borders France, right? So there's a lot of people who grew up in Switzerland who speak French. So born in Switzerland, moves to France, and he witnesses the excess of the French nobility prior to the French Revolution. And he believed there had to have been a better way to organize society, right? Which is a very classical liberal thing to believe. If you are pro-monarchy, then you're pro-classical conservatism. If you are against monarchy, then you are more of a classical liberal, right? Liberal wanting change at that time. Now, why do we talk about Rousseau? We talk about Rousseau because of his book that he wrote called The Social Contract. Now look, we talked about the social contract already. We talked about how Thomas Hobbes was a social contract theorist, right? The social contract, according to Hobbes, was the path to stability. We gave up freedom to the Leviathan in order to have predictability, safety, all those things, right? We talked about John Locke as a social contract theorist. And for Locke, that social contract between the people and government was this idea that government's job, they owe the people the protection of life, liberty, property, and if those things aren't maintained, then the people have the right to kind of tear up that contract and move down the road to another government, right? To alter or abolish it, if you use the terms or the words of the American Declaration of Independence. Now, Rousseau gets the credit for this social contract idea because he's the one who wrote the book. So if you get a question about the social contract, you know, like ABCD, this person wrote the social contract, or, you know, something along those lines, you should be thinking Rousseau, right? The first thing you should be thinking is Rousseau. So there are many social contract theorists, but Rousseau gets the credit because he literally wrote the book. Now, guys, this idea of the social contract with Rousseau is very similar to the idea that he had with John Locke. So according to Rousseau, the social contract, it's contingent upon this idea that there's an agreement between the governed, right, the people, and those who are governing, the government themselves. And let's get into this in a little bit more detail. So yeah, society is an expression of the social contract. All members, rulers and ruled, must live by this agreement. Now, guys, Rousseau said the path to freedom was the social contract, right? This give and take between those who rule and those who are the rulers. So society, he argued, is a personal sacrifice of individual liberty for civil liberty, for civil order. So in order for society to flourish, Rousseau said, we must give up what we truly want sometimes in order to live in an orderly, caring, predictable, well-functioning society. So he said that the social contract was basically a set of rules that we all live by. Now, this set of rules that we live by, Rousseau referred to as the general will of society. So he said the job of government is to reflect the general will of society. And guys, what is the general will? Like, what is it? The general will, sorry about that line there. The general will is just basically what most people want, right? It's what most people want. Or you could argue it's simply the common good, right? So sometimes, guys, according to Rousseau and this idea of the general will, sometimes you have to put aside what you want and compromise to what most people want. So for the good of the community, we give up sort of our own individual wants at times, not always, right? You still have like freedom and expression and stuff like that, but just recognizing the fact that society is a compromise, right? Society is a compromise. And what society pursues as sort of its directives, what its sort of like central focus is, should be what most people in that society agree upon. Okay? So collective interests more important than individual interests. So Rousseau said that authority exists to advance the general will. That is their job. The job of government is to do what most people want. When you think about that, that sounds rather democratic, doesn't it? Right? That idea of government of the people, by the people, for the people, right? If it's for the people, if government's for the people, then it should be doing what they want. So according to Rousseau, government's job is to advance the general will. Now, today, guys, you could think of the general will basically as the laws that we have in our society, right? So because we don't want people to murder, right, there in the social contract that we have here in Canada, right, we basically say that, you know, if you commit the act of murder, you will be punished for it. You will go to jail. We don't want people to steal our property as a result, right? The general will of society says we should have laws against the theft of property, and as a result, there are, right? There's that idea written into our social contract here in Canada that you do not steal from people, right? You don't slander. There's all these things that you just don't do. So what do people want in society? Well, I would argue, guys, that the greatest expression of the general will is this idea of, apologies, that shouldn't be struck out. I was trying to draw an arrow, but my tablet goes crazy sometimes. I would argue, guys, that what people want is pretty basic, right? People want order. They don't want to live in a society where it's chaos, where there's fighting on the street, right? People want safety. They want to know that, you know, they're not going to get hurt. They're not going to be taken for ransom or something terrible like that. People want freedom, right? People generally want to be kind of left alone as long as what they're doing isn't impinging upon the safety and security and the enjoyment of other people. What else do we want? We want good government. And here in Canada, guys, this is abbreviated as POG, peace, order, and good government. Okay, that's sort of the mandate of the federal government of Canada, right? To maintain peace, order, and good government. That's what their job is to do. So guys, these ideas that most people agree on, that most people want, this is the general will. And this is the job of government, right? According to Rousseau, the job of government is to advance the general will. And that general will that we agree upon makes up the social contract that we all have to abide by and live with. So much like Locke, not must like Locke, but much like Locke, if the government is negligent of this duty, if it is not advancing the general will, then it is our job as the people to replace it with one that does. So I'll give you an example, guys, of the general will of society and perhaps where government isn't doing its job. In the United States of America, we know that there is a lot of gun violence, okay? And, you know, every time there's a mass shooting in the United States of America, it seems like most Americans agree that stricter gun control is something that Americans want. Yet, when it comes to actually passing any sort of measured response to ensure that guns don't get in the hands of the wrong people, it never, ever happens. And of course, we could get into the politics of like lobby groups, the NRA, and all this kind of stuff. But look, guys, when most Americans agree that there needs to be some sort of gun control, yet you have this very small moneyed group of individuals who are preventing from that, or who are preventing that from happening, is that a desertion or a dereliction of the general will? I would argue yes, right? So anyways, there's other issues in society as well, right? Like right now here in Canada, there's a lot of talk of something called universal basic income. And there's a poll that is being put out right now by the federal government that is asking, do you think that universal basic income is a good idea? And this whole idea of UBI, guys, it would give every Canadian citizen X number of dollars a month. And whatever that dollar amount is, I don't know. And the whole point of it, guys, is when you give people disposable income, it will improve their quality of life. It will require them to, or allow them to, like, perhaps study longer, go to university. It lowers crime rates. It lowers drug dependency rates, because generally it's unhappy people who aren't in a situation that they like that then use drugs, right? So, I mean, if most Canadians say that, yes, we want universal basic income, should that be something that the government does? And the answer would be yes, if they are advancing the general will of society. And that right there is our friend Rousseau, one of the most famous powdered wigs in history. And you can see, right, the contract social de principles du droit politique, or whatever it says there, right? So Rousseau says the social contract reflects the general will, right? That agreement between the rulers and the ruled needs to reflect what most people in society wants. And it's just kind of that simple, okay? Okay, that is the end. Another one knocked out. We're halfway through, right? We're about halfway through. Voltaire, right? There's 5 left. Voltaire's going to be short, but anyways, let's keep going. Peace. Love you guys as always.